the gospel of LDL is going to kill you is a consensus statement. And what a consensus statement is a group of people that are experts in the field get together, they look over all the data, they come up with all this information, and then they go, this is basically a fact. And their fact is LDL causes heart disease. And because of that, you should start taking these lipid-lowering drugs. There's 7 pharmaceutical companies listed 143 times. You're telling me that I should start listening to what Pfizer paid these people to come up with, and I'm the one that's weird for questioning it?
Doesn't dinner sound great as it's cooking? This dinner is from Riverbend Ranch, which always provides prime or high choice. Has never been given hormones, never been given antibiotics, never been given mRNA vaccines. It's raised in the USA. It's processed in the USA. In fact, it's fully vertically integrated, which means that they own the cow that gives birth to the calf that's raised on their fields and then taken to their butcher and then shipped to you. And if we compare what we can buy from Riverbend Ranch to 4 other major steak companies that sell bundles that have ribeyes and other meat in it, it can be as much as $184 to $59 less expensive. It's a great price value, and it's a delicious piece of meat. Check out mycleanbeef.com/after-hours. That's mycleanbeef.com/after-hours. mycleanbeef.com/after-hours. If you've noticed, I've been wearing this t-shirt for a few episodes now. I have them available on eBay. Check out the links below to get your size.
Welcome to After Hours with Dr. Sigaloff. On this podcast, you will be encouraged to question everything and to have the courage to stand for the truth. And now, to your host, Dr. Sigaloff.
Hey, first I want to give a shout out to all of my Patreon subscribers. Too Tough giving $30 a month. We've got the Anonymous Family Donor giving $20.20 a month. We've got the Plandemic Reprimando tier at $17.76 a month with Ty, Charles, Tinfoil, Stanley, Dr. Anna, Frank, Brian, Shell, Brantley, Gary, and Sharon. We've got Kevin Alanos and Pat and Bev giving $10 a month. We have the Refine Not Burned tier at $5 with Linda, Emmy, Joe, PJ, Rebecca, Marcus, Elizabeth, Dawn, Ken, Rick, Mary, and Amanda. Addison Mulder's giving $3 a month, and Frank is giving $1.50. And then finally, we have the Courage is Contagious tier at $1 a month with Jay, Spesnasty, Durrell, Susan, BB King, and Caleb. And don't forget to check out mycleanbeef.com/after-hours. That's mycleanbeef.com/after-hours for better than grass-fed, grass-finished beef and some of the best beef I've ever tasted in my life. My next guest today is Carnivore JT, or Jason. Now, Jason, you are a subscriber to Carnivore, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I've been coming up on 2 years. September will be 2 years now.
So 2 years. That's a wonderful time frame to be doing this. What opened up your mind to do this, and does it have anything to do with your profession? Are you in the medical field at all? Do you think it would make it easier if you were in the medical field, or more difficult to open your mind to eating this way?
Oh, man. So I am not currently in the medical field. My background is in sports, and so the science end of it. My bachelor's is in sports medicine. I have a master's of science, and then I spent a number of years coaching baseball collegiately at the Division I level, in addition to strength conditioning, personal training, all that jazz. Had a stint of amateur bodybuilding in there. So a lot of my background is the nutrition aspect of it. And honestly, I kind of started carnivore because I had kids, got a dad bod, put on a few extra pounds, and I was like, nah, I gotta get off this. And my old tricks were working, but I felt like crap. I was like, man, so this is dumb. Like, I'm being super strict. I'm not cheating. I'm not having any alcohol. I'm not doing anything. And I still feel terrible. And by terrible, I mean like I was still bloated all the time. I felt like lethargic, was zero processed foods, zero nothing. And so then I gave it up, gained the weight back, and then finally had an aha moment where I was like, all right, I got to do something else. And I came across carnivore. I started on the animal based, which is carnivore plus basically fruits, and started that and instantly felt better. And from a physiological standpoint, I can understand it. Never thought of it, but I can understand it. And so I was like, okay, I can start doing this. I really did it haphazardly for about 3 months and I got really good results. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to buckle down a little bit more. And that was beginning of 23. And I've kind of buckled down ever since. I've slowly gotten stricter and stricter and gotten rid of the animal based aspect. And so now I'm strict carnivore. And it's honestly, I do it because I feel better. Um, it's helped a number of not very serious medical conditions like, some psoriasis issues. Um, Even though it doesn't appear so, like some of my balding stopped, had a little bit of hair regrowth, just a number of things. I started sleeping better, and again, nothing crazy. Like I can share crazy stories from people who have had huge successes, but mine was just a whole bunch of little things that I just felt better. And people will often tell me, why are you doing this, or why would you be so restrictive, or it's not sustainable. And I'm like, because honestly I feel better. I could go back to eating whatever I want as long as I had periods of like, going back to strict, not eating junk food. I could eat whatever I want, but I don't feel as good, so I don't want to. I mean, that I feel like that's the definition of sustainable to me.
Yeah. How does life get better? And life gets better in so many ways when you eat this way.
100%.
So when you went from eating what probably most people would say, hey, I was eating pretty clean, and then you went to this animal based where it's like fruit and meats and sweets, as some people say. What did you cut out specifically? I just want to hear you say it so that everyone can understand what you're not eating vegetables, so they get past that moment.
That was honestly it. So the the last little diet run I did before I started animal based was Whole 30. I did that for 90 days. And for anybody who doesn't know Whole 30, it's literally just whole foods, um, which is what most people would think of clean eating. And the biggest difference is I replaced the lean meats, uh, chicken, ground turkey, that with higher fat content beef. And then I still, I eat some other meats, but beef is the majority of what I eat. And then I cut the vegetables out. And that's the one that shocks people. They're like, you don't eat vegetables? I'm like, no, I legit feel 100 times better by not eating vegetables. And I will go round and round with people all day long. But man, I'm telling you, when people start cutting out vegetables, they instantly feel better. Like it's not something that 6 months down the road, I'm going to feel better, after my body adjusts. No, it's like the same day that I cut vegetables out, I started feeling better. And I was like, I'm not ever doing this again.
Yeah, people are shocked when I say, "Oh, I haven't had a vegetable in 4 years." They're like, "What?" But my mom always said I had to eat them. Well, who else teaches you need to eat vegetables? The government.
The government.
They also tell you should eat all the grains. Huh. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, I'm currently, so that's the other thing, man. When you start eating this way, you basically red pill yourself. Like you start looking into other aspects. You're like, okay, so they tell me I shouldn't eat red meat, but I feel better eating red meat. They tell me I should eat vegetables, but I feel better without eating vegetables. And then you just go on and on and on. And then you start getting into nutritional studies and, you start looking into, I don't even know if you can call it a conspiracy. I'm pretty sure it's a proven fact of back in the 60s when they paid off scientists to lie about saturated fat in favor of sugar. It's like, no, they told everybody saturated fat's the culprit and sugar is not a problem. And then you just realize that there's just this whole trail. And then you go, okay, well, what exactly can I look at? And it culminates with I did this video on LDL, and I went crazy. It's about to hit 1 million views on Instagram right now,
Wow.
and there are hundreds of people in the comments defending big pharmaceutical companies. Like it, for anybody who hasn't seen the video, it's the most like the gospel of LDL is going to kill you is a consensus statement. It's the European Atherosclerosis Society, and what a consensus statement is a group of people that are experts in the field get together. They look over all the data, they come up with all this information, and then they go, "This is basically a fact." And their fact is LDL causes heart disease, and because of that, you should start taking these lipid lowering drugs. And all I literally did was somebody cited that. I went down to the conflicts of interest statement, and I was like, there's 7 pharmaceutical companies listed 143 times, and it's this, 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 this. That's literally the entire video. And the number of people who come in and go, but is the study wrong? Are you suggesting that that's not good science? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, you're telling me that I should start listening to what Pfizer paid these people to come up with, and I'm the one that's weird for questioning it? And just because Pfizer had a hand in financially contributing to the people whose opinion favored them the most, why does that make the data wrong? I'm like, you
Wow.
can't be serious, right? Like you literally cannot tell me that, and then people will justify it any which way. And I'm like, okay, like at some point, and then I did a follow-up video and I'm like, cool, these 7 companies have paid out $28 billion in fines since 2000 because, they care about health.
And they're doing good things for humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's all they're here for, to help us. It doesn't matter if stuff is experimental or they pay people to skew data or, whatever it is. We should trust them.
I found this article from 2012 written by the American Heart Association saying that 2012, if we lower LDL, we increase the risk of AFib, atrial fibrillation. Well, how do you keep people going to the cardiologist? Well, you give them all AFib with the medication that you're required by insurance to give to lower their risk of heart attacks and strokes. It's mind
Well,
blowing.
yeah, and what they've done basically is they came up with this arbitrary number. They're like, you know what, 130. I forget what the actual
It's 99 now
units.
for LDL.
Yeah. I forget what the units of measurement are for LDL. But they're like 130. That's the number. If you are above that, we got to get you below it. And then they come back and go, you know what? I think 100. And then other doctors goes, you know what? We should really try to get everybody under 70. And then you have doctors come out and goes, this is what they're working on right now. And I don't think people understand. They're working on gene altering technology to try to get people to 0. They want people to get to as close to an LDL of 0 as possible.
Wow.
Which is also mind-blowing because LDL is not actually cholesterol. LDL is a lipoprotein that carries cholesterol through your bloodstream. And so it's just like it's no different than the American Diabetic Association putting added sugar recipes on their websites. And like it's just at some point you have to like stop looking at studies and go, okay, let's just think about this a little bit. And does this make sense whatsoever?
I mean, it's almost just you explaining that. It's almost like people trying to outdo each other with the minimum wage. It's, oh, well, let's do $10 an hour. Let's do 15. I can call for 50. Let's do $50 an hour. Let's get 0 LDL. People will die the moment they're born.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, and people, I've realized with all the access to information, like everybody wants to live their life based on a study, right? People don't want to do carnivore because they'll go, show me the long-term study. I'm like, why do I need a long-term study? And this is my, or they'll cite Sean Baker, who goes, no, there are no long-term studies. And you know what? Maybe it will kill me early. And people are like, what? I'm like, okay, I can find you a study that says everything. I can find you a study that drinking Coke raises your testosterone. It's in mice, but that doesn't matter, right? Or I can find you a study on anything.
Yeah.
And my view on it, and for anybody listening, and what I tell everybody, and I don't give medical advice, and if you listen to me for medical advice, that's your own fault. But if I can eat a certain way and feel better, and all of these issues start to resolve themselves, like inflammatory issues start to be resolved, and all of these markers go up, literally every single marker goes up. But then you tell me that there's this one arbitrary number that you made up, and that's what's going to kill me. And I'm like, okay, our bodies are a little bit smarter than that. Like I'm not buying it that your body's going to go, yes, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. Just kidding, that's going to kill you. Which, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, LDL is not actually a number that's tested. Okay, it's derived from the Friedwald equation based on other things that they test, which is also funny because in certain situations, such as high HDL and low triglycerides, you can get a skewed Friedwald equation. But they don't actually test for it. They can, but it's a much more invasive process. And they don't typically do blood tests for it. They just derive it from an equation.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I probably should have known that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, people are like, I'm going to test for it. And you're like, well, I mean, you're kind of going to test for it, but you're going to come up with an equation for it. But yeah, like, so that, like, that's the LDL thing for me. Again, do I think you should completely disregard it? No. But in the absence of like literally every other metabolic marker, it's something that you can go, okay, like I'll look at it, but should I jump on a medication for it? Like, no, I don't. Now go look into the side effects of statins and studies that are showing people are getting dementia from it. And you're like, at some point we got to stop trying to use drugs for everything and literally like just live how you're intended to, which they then come back with, but our ancestors lived to 35. I'm like, yeah, because they died from paper cuts. Like like you literally died from
They got
infections.
gored
What
by a
everybody
bull.
died
Yeah.
from, because there was no penicillin,
Yeah.
there's no antibiotics. Everybody literally died the moment they got hurt.
Well, I think that's the long-term study. That is the 10,000-year study to show that it worked, is that they live long enough for us to live here today to start eating garbage to destroy our health.
Yeah, which I mean, that's like, then that's the next thing. People literally 90% of what I do is try and combat people talking about how eating processed food is okay, or it's healthy, or that in literally industrial seed oils, which were literally designed as engine lubricant. That's the biggest scam of the century, is how Canada got us to eat canola oil. And you're telling me that's cardioprotective. There are doctors with a platform on social media that tell you that seed oils are cardioprotective. I'm like, you've literally, like, go watch a video on how seed oils are made. There's a byproduct, they bleach it. There's bleaching clay that they use. And the bleaching clay that's left over has to be put in a landfill because it's too toxic to do anything with.
Wow.
But it's good for us.
But there was a thing that they said that Oreos lower LDL as much as statins. And that should make you go, why is my doctor either not prescribing me Oreos or maybe my LDL shouldn't be lowered?
Yeah, and that's a fascinating one. So I know Nick, and I've talked to him multiple times about it. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, Nick Norwitz is what you would call a lean mass hyperresponder. So is very lean and has very high LDL. And so what he did is he ran a trial and said, okay, I am hypothesizing that I can lower my LDL more by eating, I think it was like 12 Oreos a day. Don't quote me on it. It's in the study. I can lower it more over a couple weeks with Oreos than I can with statins. And he did. And he lowered his LDL significantly more eating Oreos as the only thing that he changed in his diet. And it goes to his lipid energy model, which I don't have 100% grasp on it. But yeah, that brings the statement. Okay, you're telling me that I can lower this arbitrary number that's going to kill me. And you're telling me that they'll come up with the statistics. For every 10 points that it drops, you lower your risk of heart disease by 15%. Like, it's just these crazy numbers. And you go, okay, so what you're telling me is that eating Oreos is beneficial for this, and thus Oreos is going to reduce my risk of heart disease. Like, do you realize how absurd that is?
It's absolutely absurd. And, I've actually written a prescription for beer, but I'll never write a prescription for Oreos.
Yeah,
And
it's
for all the naysayers out there, there's a guy in ICU who's going through withdrawals, and he's like, just give me a beer. And so in those situations, you do give them back the medication they've been taking for 20 years, and all of a sudden their dementia or their DTs and all that go away within minutes once you get them back on the medication that they've been on for years.
that's crazy. I didn't know you could actually prescribe beer.
Yeah, it was the cheap stuff. It was a tall boy, 2 a day. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But the moral of that story is don't prescribe beer. Just don't drink that much every day to where your brain becomes dependent on that medication to slow it down.
Yeah, that's nuts. But I mean, that's the same thing. So that's like you taking that and going, you know what? I think we should give dementia patients beer. You're like, wait, what? That doesn't
Right?
make sense. Literally everybody would go, well, that doesn't make sense. And you're like, but that's what the data is. Like I literally
Right.
have like a documented
I have a case report.
n equals one
Yeah.
study that it
Yeah.
works. So why shouldn't we? And then all of a sudden people with common sense come in. They're like, oh, well, see, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, okay, can we apply that to the rest of nutrition? Please. Just one time.
So what opened your mind to it? Like what doctor did you start following early on, or what studies, or was it books, or did you just like brute force on your own, figure it out, or how did that happen? How would I
Uh,
open someone else's mind that I want to open? That's what I'm trying to figure out, because that is the biggest thing is eat only meat and get healthy, and we're going against people like the who put red meat, cigarettes, and uranium in the same category of carcinogen. I mean, that's absurd.
yeah, I mean, that's so Paul Saladino, he used to be Carnivore MD and then has changed his stance to what you would consider animal based. He gets a lot of hate, which the thing you have to realize about Saladino is Saladino lives a life that nobody else lives, right? He's independently wealthy. He lives in Costa Rica. He has access to like literally the people that picked the fruit off of the tree 2 hours ago. And he spends his days surfing and literally doing whatever he wants. And so when you're living that kind of lifestyle, you can get away with certain things that the average person can't. And so he is a very big proponent of fruit and raw honey, which I'm not against. I'm not anti-fruit or raw honey. I just feel better when I'm not eating it. That's literally why I don't. So that's how I got exposed to it. My wife sent it to me, and she's like, "All right, so there's this. He's a little kooky. He's a little weird, which he is. I'll give it to him. Like that's part of like his allure, right? He's this polarizing figure that puts eggs in his hair and like all of this stuff, and you're like, that's kind of weird, but I'm intrigued, so I'm going to follow along and see what happens. And that's when I started, and I'm like, okay, like I can understand the biology of plants having plant defense chemicals and all this kind of stuff. I'm like that makes sense. Like I took a bunch of biology in college, um, which actually that's not a debated point. Like you can actually go and read plenty of studies where they identify, yes, they have plant defense chemicals, but how they justify it is they view it as like working out, right? So working out puts stress on your muscles, it breaks down muscles, and then your body rebuilds. They're like, that's what plant defense chemicals do. They force your body to work and get rid of them and move through it. And I'm like, I kind of see it, but then you can't tell me I'm weird for saying they have plant defense chemicals when that's literally what you just said. Like, everybody looks at you and they're like, oh, plant defense chemicals. And I'm like, that's literally what everybody says. They just have a different view on whether it's good or bad. And so I was like, okay, like anything to not be bloated all the time. And so I started, that's literally all I took from him was don't eat vegetables. So I stopped eating vegetables and I was like, this is the best thing in the world. And so I did that for about a year. And then that's when I really started getting a little more red pilled and got a little more deeper into it.
Yeah, I love Anthony Chaffee. Dr. Anthony Chaffee really gets into the plant defense. I mean, he deep dives into that stuff, and it's shocking. I mean, when I lived in Alaska, there was this phenomenon with the rabbit population that would go up and down. And as the rat population went up, there'd be more rabbits eating more plants. And I always thought, well, as the predators go up and they push the population down, when in fact it's the plants send a chemical to other plants that they've been able to measure how it propagates, and it causes the female rabbits to uh, abort their fetus. Now that should terrify everybody here, because if they can cause a female to abort its fetus, how do we know that can't affect humans?
Yeah, I mean and when I started looking, I'm like, okay, what are the benefits of plants? Mostly vegetables, right? I'm mostly talking about vegetables. And I'm like, okay, so there's some vitamins, but not like a lot. Like at the end of the day, if I really, really was worried about it, I can take a pill for that. And then fiber. That's literally all you're getting from plants. And people are like, oh, well, phytonutrients and antioxidants. And I'm like, yeah, I can get plenty of that. And the benefits of them's a little overstated. So I'm like, okay, so fiber. Once I removed fiber, everything was better. Like, and the one I've heard is fiber, which, okay, blows me away. The definition of fiber is the indigestible part of a plant. Okay, that's red flag number one. What you're telling me is in order to be healthy, I need to consume this piece of a plant that by definition I can't digest. Okay. And then, there's the fermenting and the gut microbiome and the bacteria. And I'm like, okay, maybe. But the one that really gets me is you need fiber to scrub your colon. And I'm like, you're basically telling me I need to like swallow a scrub daddy so that my colon gets cleaned out. Like, that's literally the most absurd thing I've ever heard. And if I don't, I'm going to get cancer. Like, what? Yeah. Yeah. And so then you go look at research, and this is where I've kind of found my niche with social media is just like ripping to shreds these research studies, because I've realized that 95% of nutrition studies are all just absolute terrible. Like they're horrible. And I started with a fiber study because like you need to eat fiber for every 7 grams of fiber you eat, your risk of heart disease goes down by 9%. I was like, okay, that's like a wild claim. How on earth can you correlate that? And sure enough, they go through and they collect with FFQs. And for anybody that doesn't know what FFQ is, it's a food frequency questionnaire, which is how 99.9% of all nutritional studies get their information. And it's literally, you can equate it to pollsters getting information for the presidential election. Right now you can email, but in the past it was you mailed out this questionnaire, could be anywhere from 35 questions to 200 questions. And it starts with this, and they go, okay, in the last 12 months, have you eaten meat? And you go, yes. Okay, keep going. How many times in the last 12 months have you had a sandwich with steak in it? I don't know, like 4 times. Okay, on a weekly basis, how many times do you eat a main dish with meat in it? And it can include casseroles and stews and pot pies. You're like, okay. And then it's like, how many times have you had pizza with meat on it, or a mixed dish like lasagna or pasta? And all of those get classified. And you're like, okay, like that's like, all right. And then they compile this data and go, we found that the people who ate 50 grams or less did this. And you're like, how can you equate that? Like, you literally just asked me if I had pizza. And that's a red meat. Like, in some studies, that's considered red meat. And you like, how, what? And then they come up with these very specific dosages and these very specific risk estimates. And in the study, they'll say, we can't prove it because it's an observational study, but it's our hypothesis. And I know that there's this margin of error, so don't focus on the risk estimate. But CNN's going to run an article that says, eat more fiber, you're going to die. And then everybody believes it. Everybody cites it. Everybody treats it as gospel. And then you go, what are we doing here? Like, this is the most absurd, like, correlation is causation thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it? That they can say, oh, you ate some pizza and some lasagna, and that counts as red meat, so don't eat red meat. Like,
No, that That's literally what it is. That's what started this was the Harvard study on red meat and diabetes. And somebody came out and they're like, wait a minute, let's take a look at this. And they pulled up the FFQ that they used, and sandwiches, lasagna, pizza, mixed dish, pastas, hot dogs, hamburgers. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's you made a patty or you went to McDonald's, all of those fell under the umbrella of red meat. And they're like, we have found that people that eat more of this get. I'm like, well, no shit. Like, you go find the person that goes to McDonald's, eats a 2 ounce patty, but then eats all the other garbage with it, and of course they're going to get diabetes. Like, you can't be shocked that that's the result. But instead, you come back and tell me that it's based on red meat.
Right, because they eat that. They're eating a potato doused in bad oils. They're not eating meat.
Yeah, which not only bad oils, but has been fried over and over and over and over again. And there's numerous studies showing that the more often you heat up and then cool down and then heat up these seed oils, the worse it gets. But it's the red meat that's causing what?
Do you get into the statistics at all and how those can easily be manipulated if you know how to massage the numbers in the way that you want them to?
So a little bit. I got into a little bit with the LDL study. So I have a little bit of background in statistics as far as I took a couple statistics classes in college. But what people think it's impossible to, they're like, well, it's data. You can't do anything with it. I'm like, no, if I adjust my endpoints, right? So if I adjust the points of which I collect my data, I can now, because I can observe it in a trend, right? I can now do a cutoff and get it to say something that's not what it is. The LDL one is a huge one. The endpoint for their graph, because you'll see this graph. Everybody will do this linear causation between LDL and heart disease. And the endpoint for their data was a major cardiac event, which seems reasonable, heart attack, stroke, something like that. But if you take that same data and replot it for an atherosclerotic cardiovascular death, then all of a sudden it's a scatter plot and it's all over the place. And then you go, well, okay, so maybe it's possibly linear with heart disease, but it's definitely not linear with dying from heart disease. And what's more important? Like 75% of people that have a heart attack have LDL within the normal range. So high LDL is not going to kill me, but it's going to give me a heart attack. But most people that have a heart attack don't have high LDL, or like, what exactly are you telling me is going to happen if I have high LDL? And most of the time they're like, well, it's going to kill you. I'm like, okay, then why didn't you plot that? Because it doesn't look as good. And that's a manipulation of data, is choosing my endpoints, choosing my start points, choosing what studies I keep, choosing what studies I exclude. And all by that, I can get a result that looks better than what it might have been otherwise.
What other things have you uh, started questioning that's really made you question even more or kind of dig in places that you never thought you should even need to dig in?
It's literally everything now. Like I swear I'm the weird dude that's gonna hide out in the back acre of a 40 acre homestead. Like I'm gonna become one of those dudes on like Shooter. Like I'm gonna become the Mark Wahlberg where he lives in the middle of Montana and doesn't have any contact with the outside world. Uh, because now it's all of it. Like I'm realizing that literally any recommendation that the government or a government organization, yes, the WHO is a government organization. I don't care what you say. Any recommendation is based on very sketchy information. Or it's a collection of a couple studies, and then every study that shows the opposite is disregarded. And so then it's like, okay, RDAs come into question, recommended dietary allowances, like how much vitamin C you're supposed to get, how much vitamin D, and then you go, okay, they kind of came up with this arbitrary number that said, I think this is going to work for the majority of people who are semi-healthy. Let's come up with this number. And now everybody bases that off of like, oh well, you got to get more vitamin C. Why? Because you're going to get scurvy. Come on, no like affluent person gets scurvy. Why? Well, because they eat fruits and vegetables. No, that's not it. Like scurvy is based on sailors in the 1800s who had rotting fruit and salt dried processed food. And they found that if they gave them fresh food, they would not have scurvy anymore. And so then people are like, gosh, we have to have vitamin C. Like, okay, like it's just on and on and on and on and literally everything. And then people turn it and they're like, oh, you just got to question everything and you find holes with anything. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I don't literally don't trust any study. I don't care if it's a pro carnivore study. There was a study that came out that said all the other studies sucked on red meat. Yeah, that guy had ties to the meat industry. I don't really trust that one either. I don't trust any of them. Like that's what people don't understand. I don't trust any of these studies, but I think we should be smart enough to know that how your body reacts to how you eat is probably a pretty good indication of long-term health.
I think it's great. I think that's amazing. You found an article that corresponds with the way you think, but you still said, "No, that's garbage. I'm going to look into it," and it was garbage.
Yeah, it's and it's easy to cherry pick studies. It is, especially when there's not a whole lot on your side. But at the end of the day, it's a lot easier just to be like, maybe we should all just realize that all these studies suck. Like the latest one, that it might not even make it to a study. It hasn't been peer reviewed yet, but it was presented. It's been in articles. It's headlined everywhere that intermittent fasting leads to 91% higher chance of heart disease. Where on earth can you draw the? I don't even need to read the study. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. You're telling me that by going a couple extra hours of not eating, I'm going to get heart disease, and not just a little bit, 91%. Like you're telling me that I have the same chance of living by running in traffic as I do intermittent fasting. Like what? You've got to be kidding me. And granted, most people are like, yeah, there's problems with the study. I'm like, no kidding. Why do you even need to look at it? Are you telling me you legit have to look at this study to tell me that this is ridiculous?
I mean, with that logic, no human would have survived to get to us here today because I'm sure they went a couple of days in between meals when you have to chase down your next meal.
Yeah, that's the other one. People, it's always the life expectancy too, and it again leads me back. Like I don't care what your views on how we got here, because I can play this both ways. You can believe that we were created, or you can believe that we evolved. But either way, there's no way we're the only species in the history of this planet that has been doing food wrong for their entire existence. Like, can you imagine if 100 years from now, a lion all of a sudden was like, guys, we have not been meant to eat gazelles. We're in trouble. We should be living till we're 50, not 20. And then they start eating ground squirrels. It's like, no, like literally no other species of anything is as confused about what we're supposed to eat as we are.
Well, and not just what we're to eat, but just as confused as we are, whether it be what's in our pants or in our genome or what the economy is or what we should be shoving into our bodies or our kids' bodies or, I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
What other studies have you found that just make you scoff at the investigators, really? And if you do like you did with the first one, you dive into who the investigators are, you can usually see that they have some sort of um, bias, and it's usually not subtle.
Yeah. Like, so I just did one. And again, it's this, it's social media. Like, social media is to blame, right? It's 100% social media. What can I make that's a headline that's grabbing and gets people's attention because nobody actually looks at anything anyway, right? We still have people that don't know how to read like the nutrition facts on the back of a box. Like they don't understand what it is. And it's the most in plain sight thing ever. Like you have little tricks like they make calories bigger and then make everything else smaller so that you just focus on the calories and you don't worry about anything else that's in it. The ingredients are all smaller listed than, but this influencer was like, drinking Diet Coke helps you lose weight better than drinking water. And I was like, you've got to be shitting me. Of course, they don't cite the study, but I'm like, okay, let's go look at it. And so I found it, and it was a 52-week study, and they said that the weight loss was statistically significant. However, it was not clinically significant because in order to be clinically significant, you have to have more than a 1.5 kilogram change in body weight between the two groups, which they didn't over the course of an entire year. So I'm like, okay, like, so first of all, we're talking about less than 3 pound difference between two groups over the course of a year. And then you realize that there was no like dietary information. There was no like active, they gave people coaching on how to lower their calories, but there was no control over anything. And the premise of it was 2 servings of water for one group and 2 servings of non-nutritive sweetened beverages, just Diet Coke, for the other group. And they tracked their weight loss. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, and guess who funded the study?
Is it
The
Diet
American
Coke?
Beverage Association.
Yeah.
And one of the conflicts of interest was the International Sweetener Association. And I was like, how is there's an International Sweetener Association? Like, what the like, I've always joked that it's like big sugar and big meat, but no, it's literally like, we are the International Sweetener Association. I was like, you gotta be joking me right now.
Did you ever see either was it Forks Over Knives or You Are What You Eat?
I have never watched either of them because
You
I
don't need
don't
an
need to.
aneurysm? Yeah.
Like, I've thought about doing like a video of me pretending to watch it to piss vegans off, but like vegans. So a little short story on vegans. Vegans are how I got going on Twitter. Twitter was the first platform that kind of went off for me, and I got it by just railing on vegans nonstop.
They're
And so
easy
for a while, I
targets.
was like, you know what? I'm going to do a video of pretending that I'm going to watch. I think Dominion's the most popular one for them. I don't even know what it's about. Some vegan propaganda. It's like I'm going to pretend like I'm watching it and then finish the video with me eating a steak while I'm pretending to watch it. Because let's be honest, I'm not spending longer than 2 minutes actually
You're not gonna
looking
waste your
at
life.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. The latest one was not Game Changers. The twin study. I forget
Yeah,
what
that's a You Are What You
it's
Eat.
called. Is that what you are? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one, like,
It's
I
total
saw the study
garbage.
before. I saw the study before it came out, and they highlighted the couple points, like LDL got better for the vegan group, but HDL got better for the other group. Triglycerides got better for the other group. The vegans lost weight, but they also ate fewer calories,
They
which
also lost
vegans
muscle mass.
equate. Yeah, they also lost muscle mass, and vegans equate that to the fact that I did hear this one. Well, the other set of twins that were doing the omnivores diet just like to work out more. I was like, you're shitting me, right? Like, you've got to be kidding me. And then the fact that the vegans ate fewer calories was because they were more satiated eating the vegan diet than the omnivores. I'm like, literally nobody's ever been satiated eating plants a day in their life. Like, that's a non-existent term. And then you went in and you realized that the people that funded it are also the people that funded Game Changers, and the doctor has been getting paid by Beyond Meat. And you're like, at some point, and they had this documentary already filmed and ready to go before the study even came out.
Wow.
And I'm like, come on, like, you've got to, at some point you have to look at it and go, maybe something fishy's going on. But no, people, if you're a vegan, that's gospel, that's proof. That's two identical twins and the vegans did better. And it's
I think
garbage.
a better study would have been a real head-to-head study would have been veganism versus carnivorism, because I watched that unfortunately, and they gave the omnivores like this sausage, and a sausage is typically known for having junk in it, and like you don't know what oils are in there, you don't know if they packed the omnivores more with seed and nut oils and processed oils. Um, turkey turkey sausage, I mean, like that's not the same as beef.
Yeah, and so actually, and here's where it is, and here's how you know that this is an issue. We've done studies on everything, like, and so now they're playing the ethical card. And I've at some point I'll do a video to this one, but there is a vegan doctor, and they're talking about it. They're like, the long-term studies on carnivore. Why are there no long-term studies? And the doctor goes, because we've decided that based on everything that we know, it would be unethical to get a group of people and feed them that diet over any length of time. And I'm like, if that is not the biggest cop out, how do you think you guys did studies on smoking or alcohol? Or you'll put anybody in a metabolic ward and pump them full of anything, but you will not do it with meat because you know that if it came back that meat was even slightly more healthy than vegan, literally the entire world would crumble. Like, can you imagine the like the backlash from everything from 99% of the store, 99% of the grocery store? Everybody would go, wait a minute, this is actually could be better. Like, people would just go absolutely nuts.
I recently got sent this article that says that 12% of the United States is consuming, uh, I want to say it's like 90% of the beef in America. And I want to tell you, I'm proud to be part of the 12% with you.
Yeah, like what's also funny is people have paired this up. Like, even Sean Baker did this, and I'm like, come on, bro, like, this is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Uh, it pairs up nicely to the fact that a researcher in Utah came out with a study that said 88% of the U.S. population is metabolically sick. And so then people are like, 88% are sick, 12% eat beef.
Hmm. Is there?
Interesting. And then everybody goes, oh my God, you can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, you guys do that all the time. So stop.
Yeah, you can't do it, but it's interesting.
Yes.
And I've had patients. I had a patient. I had one patient go from having insulin to he required 80 units of insulin to keep his sugars under control. He would take 80 units every single day. He started carnivore, and in the first week he went down to 10 units. And recently I've had a patient who was on 30 units of insulin and metformin and two blood pressure pills. He started on a Sunday. He saw me 5 days later, and he had his blood pressure under control, not taking his pills. His sugar was under control, not taking any insulin nor metformin. He stopped everything in 5 days just by eating meat.
And that, like, that's what I'm saying. And everybody goes, it's anecdotal. And I'm like, okay, we'll do a study on it. Well, no. Well, why don't you guys do a study? Who's going to fund it? Who do you think I work for? Like, everybody's like, oh, Big Beef is sending you. Big Beef doesn't need to do any studies. They're doing just fine. Like, Big Beef is also part of the problem. Like, they're not the solution. Let's be real here. And so it's like there's no money. This doesn't benefit anybody except for the US population if this comes out to be true. And so why would anybody fund a study? You don't just get random money from random people. You'd have to, like, start a GoFundMe, and then everybody would question the funding because it came from people that want this to succeed. So it's like, yeah, I've talked to so many people who have gotten off medication by eating this way, and it's everything. It's everything from blood pressure medication to insulin to antidepressants to, thyroid medication to IBS medication to lifelong, Parkinson's medication to just all of this stuff, antibiotics, just the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And the only thing anybody says is that's anecdotal. I'm like, okay, cool. If I'm talking to somebody and it works for them and it's only anecdotal, they're going to be pretty happy. They're not going to give a shit if there's document that 100,000 people also had success, because at the end of the day, it's fitness and life and nutrition is N equals one. That's literally the only thing that matters. And so if it works for everybody, but there's no documented study, don't care.
Have you run across the people that say, "Well, I know my body, and I've got to have my vegetables"?
Oh yeah. And And I've talked to a bunch of people, and the difference is I don't think people actually understand how they feel.
Hmm.
There's people like, I'm not bloated, and I'm like, I'm willing to bet you're wrong, and you just don't know it. Like that's normal. Like Thanksgiving dinner, I'm gonna wear my stretchy pants to Thanksgiving dinner because after I eat, I'm like, no, that's not normal. It does not matter how much food you eat. I can eat a 2 pound ribeye right now and not be bloated. Like it is not the amount of food that you're eating that should make you bloated. It's what you're eating, and nobody can wrap their head around it. And it's literally not until you give stuff up and you realize that you were bloated all the time. Like I go back to the bodybuilding days, and it's a joke in the fitness community in general. You wake up first thing in the morning, you snap your progress pictures because that's the leanest you're going to be all day. And the moment you even sniff water, you add 5 pounds. And then all of a sudden you walk around like a balloon the rest of the day, hoping that you wake up the next morning feeling lean. And so it's just, people don't understand. They don't understand that, like, I was a college athlete. I'm missing the majority of the meniscus in both my knees. I've been rolling out of bed since I was 19 years old, feeling like I got hit by a train. Like I'd play weekend doubleheaders and roll out Monday morning and be like, oh my gosh, like I literally feel like I got hit by a bus. And then you roll into the training, room, and then you get your treatment, and then you roll out and you hope that you don't hurt too bad for the next day. And I don't have issues anymore. Like I don't have problems with my knees. I don't have the old like, oh man, I gotta like bend over, or I have chronic shoulder problems. I've had 4 surgeries before I got out of college, and most of them are probably would indicate that I'm gonna have arthritic shoulders and arthritic knees, and all kinds of these issues. And I still may. Like I'm not saying I'm cured or anything, but I don't feel old. Like I feel better than when I rolled out of bed when I was 25 years old. Like everything hurt when I was 25. Like people would be like, "Oh, I feel like I'm getting old." Be like, I felt like I'm getting old since I was 15 years old. Like this is not new for me, and now I don't have chronic inflammation. Like you shouldn't have chronic inflammation. You should be able to live normal. And if something catches up to you, it catches up to you. But we shouldn't have this every day. I'm tired. Every day I need caffeine all day long. I need a nap after I eat. I'm dragging. I get home and have no motivation. And it's just try the diet. Like everybody thinks we're selling something. I don't sell coaching. I don't sell anything. I sell apparel because I think it's funny. Like I have a cookbook if you want to, spice it up a little bit, literally and figuratively. But I don't need to sell the diet. I just want people to try it. Like, and that's my pitch. Like, try it for 30 days. Cut out processed foods. Cut out vegetables. If you want to eat some fruit, eat some fruit. Just try it for 30 days. Like, literally, what is the worst that could possibly happen? Like, maybe you have the keto flu for a week and you get constipated and you're like, this is dumb and I never do it again. Or you can be like the thousands and thousands of people that go, I felt really good. Like, really good. And I'm like, maybe that tells you something.
I had a patient once who was he's overweight. He's got a lot of weight to lose, but he started carnivore and he's been doing good at it. And he went to his family's house. They made him some eggs in margarine. He didn't want to be rude, so he didn't say anything. And within 3 bites, his knee pain, his extreme knee pain came back. And he's like, I will never do that again. I will never be eating something just to be kind. I will say, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah, like people look at you weird, right, when you do that. And I'm like, okay, when you understand how good actually feels, any slight variation changes it. Like I don't get headaches anymore. I had chronic headaches for a long time that I could manage. Like they weren't bad. Like took some, 3 or 4 days a week. I had to pop some Tylenol or something to get rid of it. I, go to the chiropractor, get my neck worked on. But chronic headaches, and then I don't have them. When I get a headache now, I immediately go, my electrolytes got to be off. Like I got to be off on some of my electrolytes. I'm going to go mix some electrolytes in some water, chug it, and most of the time I will feel better. And that doesn't happen very often because I know that as long as I keep my electrolytes in check, I don't have headaches. And people will be like, well, that's like, come on, like you can't be that sensitive. Like it's not a sensitivity issue. It's you realize that these are the things that are causing it. And you've just lived with it so chronically that that's just normal for you now. And you think I'm the weird one. Like
Yeah.
you get up like this every day and you're like, oh man, I gotta shit. No, that's the weird part. And so yeah, when there's foods or stuff that triggers some of those to come back, you instantly recognize it. I can go out to eat right now, eat a steak, and probably within 5 minutes tell you if it was cooked in something of the seed oil variety. And it's not because I'm hypersensitive and I'm like, oh man, I can't. It's because I can recognize how I feel, the difference between something cooked in animal fat and something cooked in a seed oil.
It's almost like the alcoholic who's gone the past 10 years waking up and having a hangover and thinking that's normal. And then they finally get through the withdrawals and they stop drinking and they're like, wow, it's a whole new life. It's like I can feel my body. I feel good. I've never felt good before and didn't know that I didn't feel good.
Yeah. And then that same person doesn't drink alcohol for 10 years, has one drink and gets a hangover the next day. Like nobody's going to go, oh man, you're just being overly sensitive. Everybody's going to go, oh, that makes sense. You've been so long without it. You're so
Mm-hmm.
like, this is so foreign to your body now that your body has this overreaction to it. I'm like, it's literally the same thing. Like, I know people that can get a hangover from one drink, so they don't drink.
It's not worth it.
So, but that's okay. Everybody says, oh, yeah, I get it. That makes sense. But if I tell you that I get inflammation from eating these foods, you go, oh, come on. Like, really, you're going to live your life never eating carbs again? I'm like, no, I'm going to eat carbs whenever I want. Like, I'll go eat a chocolate cake right now if I want to, but I'm not going to feel good. So why would I do that? And I will. At some point in the next however long, I will probably eat an entire chocolate cake in one sitting. And I'll go, you know what? I don't know if that was worth it. And then I won't
It's a
do it for a long time because I'll remember how I felt.
it's a big price you'll have to pay for this.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, this is great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your time with me and with my audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is great. I love doing these. I have a tendency to get locked into my own, like people call it an echo chamber, like that's a bad thing. And I just assume everybody knows that you should eat meat. And then I realize that there's a whole lot of people out there that still think you should eat lean meats and stay away from fats. And I'm like, man. So
Yeah.
yeah, anytime I can get on and talk with it, and maybe one person will hear this and go, man, maybe I should give that a try. Sounds pretty good. Like sounds too good to be true. It might be. I don't know. That's
Try
what
to
I tell
find out.
people.
Yeah.
That the last thing to end this on, it honestly doesn't matter what the long term effects are for me. And people want to go, what? Like I recently, it's been a few months. Someone I wasn't very close with, one of my grandfathers, passed away. And it was something that took like 10 years, right? Like it very slowly deteriorated, nursing home, was in bad shape for quite a while. And I realized that we're really good at keeping people alive. That's literally like you don't die from your first heart attack anymore. It's pretty uncommon for you to die from your first heart attack because we can keep people alive. But we don't keep people healthy. Like, and so if you were to tell me right now that eating the way I'm going to do is going to shave 10 years off my life, and I'm going to die at 70 instead of 80, but up until 70, I am going to feel great, I would take this. And that might sound morbid or whatever, but I absolutely do not want to be 70 years old and completely dependent on other people because I can't stand upright.
It's so deep.
It sounds terrible, but I feel great. Until I stop feeling great, I'm going to keep eating this way. And you know what? If I go out a few years earlier and I don't live a miserable existence for a few extra years, that's totally fine with me.
Where can we find you? Where can we get your merchandise, your book, and your shirts?
So I have a website, theinnercarnivore.com. It's also the name of my podcast. You can find me on pretty much every social media platform at Carnivore JT. Twitter's the only one. It's at Carnivore_JT. But Carnivore JT is you type that into a search and I'll pop up on a social media platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right. God bless. Just a reminder for everyone out there, duty uniform of the day, the full armor of God. Let's all make courage more contagious than fear. Doesn't dinner sound great as it's cooking? This dinner is from Riverbend Ranch, which always provides prime or high choice, has never been given hormones, never been given antibiotics, never been given mRNA vaccines. It's raised in the USA, it's processed in the USA. In fact, it's fully vertically integrated, which means that they own the cow that gives birth to the calf that's raised on their fields and then taken to their butcher and then shipped to you. And if we compare what we can buy from Riverbend Ranch to 4 other major steak companies that sell bundles that have ribeyes and other meat in it, it can be as much as $184 to $59 less expensive. It's a great price value, and it's a delicious piece of meat. Check out mycleanbeef.com/after hours. That's mycleanbeef.com/after hours. mycleanbeef.com/after hours.